we don't think of it more so much in terms of future of work. We think of it in terms of what's the new normal that we are entering, right? And without doubt in our mind, there's a few characteristics of the new normal. Number one, it will be hybrid. Number two, it will all be around offering flexibility of choice to the employees. I think people have gotten used to working from home for the last 18 months. We can't just tell them, come back to the office. You have to come back to the office. So it has to be more based on choice, the flexibility of choice for people. The third thing is, again, I think I like the word that we are using. It's all about reimagining the workplace. And the way I like to look at it is the work that we do can be done from anywhere. We can do it from home. We can do it from hometown. We can do it from the beach. It doesn't matter. We need to be much more deliberate about when and why people need to come into the so-called workplace.
Thank you very much for joining in here, our panelists and our leaders in the audience. So very happy to see the fraternity here, and hope you're all doing well and are keeping safe. And welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience that they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us. We've received 100+ registrations, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are repeat visitors to our webinars, which motivates us to provide higher levels of dialogue to the online channels as well. So for those of you who are new with us today, the Blue Circle is an exclusive community and ecosystem, which is curated for business leaders across 6 sectors currently, which are real estate, e-mobility, energy, healthcare, aerospace and defense, and logistics. We're very soon adding 14 new sector communities this month to form the Blue Circle 20. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. And in response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series and our digital publication. And in addition to this, to bring the community closer, I'm happy to share that we've recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle community app. It's somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with like-minded people, house high-quality curated content, and also provide access to business opportunities across our core sectors. For those readers who are interested, please do write to us. I would also share the link to the app in the chat section, and we'll also send out invitations post the webinar. So, and today we're privileged to have big minds and leading thinkers of the industry to join in to discuss the future of work. In the best interest of time, I will just briefly introduce you to our chair and moderator for the session, and thereafter request him to kickstart the session and also introduce the other panelists. Mr. Sriram Chidambaram, he's a transformational business and thought leader with a demonstrated talk track record across electronics, software, IoT, and asset management businesses in a career spanning 25 years. Currently, he is the CEO of Intelligent Community Management, ICM, a Bhartiya group company. As the leader of the organization, he's driving digital transformation of ICM and repivoting the company from a traditional asset operations company to a technology and consumer-centric asset management company. Prior to ICM, he was the CEO of ConnectM Technology Solutions, perhaps the first IoT company in India, and was involved with several rounds of growth capital raise and created exit opportunities for early investors. In the past, he has worked at Parametric Technologies, Cadence Design Systems, and Philips Electronics. His expertise areas include strategy repivot, financial turnaround, investor board engagement, driving change, leading high-intensity sales revenue programs. Through his career, he has been involved in industry initiatives, and he currently runs the Future of Work Collective Research and Advocacy Initiative. He has an engineering degree from BITS Pilani, India, and management degree from IIM Bangalore. So thank you very much for joining in and for hosting today's session. Please note that the session is being recorded and will be also well packaged and distributed to those who matter and to those who are looking to learn post the event as well. We also have received some excellent questions, and they're with our moderator for him to weave it into the conversations. So just to kickstart now, I now request Mr. Chidambaram to please chair, moderate, and also introduce the other gentlemen who've joined in. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you for your introduction and kind words. Good afternoon, gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you. I deeply appreciate all of you accepting my invitation to be part of this thought leadership group. I know how difficult it is for all of you to squeeze time out of your schedules. So a big thank you. We are in very exciting times, right? I may say a transformational one, perhaps created or definitely accelerated by this pandemic, right? Pandemic has had both good sides and bad sides. While many of us have lost some dear friends, family members, colleagues, the good part, which I would like to look forward to, is it has also shaken us out of our comfort zone and boldly rethink some existing and seemingly unchangeable paradigms. So there are a lot of green shoots, a lot of interesting ideas, experimentation, that we get to see, in the way people want to imagine the different dimensions of work, right? In short, I think the pandemic is really redefining the way we live, work, and play, right? I think there were very clear borders till a few quarters back. I think, it is now getting redefined. So as senior leaders, I thought it is incumbent upon us to take the initiative to reimagine, shape, and define the future of how we will work, and also do our bit to help the industry navigate, leverage, and exploit this change opportunity, right? This is a once-in-a-lifetime change opportunity. This thought leadership series and the session today, I think, is a very important component of this, what I call as collective research and advocacy initiative. This is not attached to any specific industry body. I've consciously kept it that way, more to avoid biases and preconceived notions creeping into and affecting our, boundaryless and openness to ideas and brainstorming, right? So based on nuggets we pick up through these series, and also from our primary and secondary research, I hope, I don't know how successful it will be, but, to bring out a playbook, that will, serve as a guiding light, as a quick reference book for a lot of leaders, organizations who want to navigate this, really be prepared and expect the disruptions and challenges, and also, see where the opportunities for them lie, and, what this offers to them. Right? So it's my honor and privilege to moderate this group today, this panel discussion. We have a fantastic, stellar set of leaders who've come together to ideate and passionately argue about the new world that they envision. So I've thought of this structure. I mean, I'll be open to any suggestions if you want to change it. I would like to introduce the panelists one by one, and ask them to make their opening remarks. So that should take about 20-25 minutes. I don't know. And I would request the panelists to keep it to about 3 to 5 minutes of opening comments on their take on future of work, how they see the challenges, the disruptions, opportunities, and solution pointers. Probably you're all very senior practicing business leaders, so you must already be trying a lot of things. So it'd be very good to hear some of those from you in the opening remarks. And then I've kept aside about 20 to 30 minutes where we can go around the table discussing specific questions, themes, topics. And as time permits, depending on how much we overrun, we'll take some questions from the audience. Right? Does that sound fair? Okay. So let me start. Let me introduce the first member of the panel, I would like to start with introducing Dinesh Malkani. Dinesh is a very renowned name in the field of business development with over 29 years of experience. He's held key leadership roles in prominent companies like AT&T, Lucent, Avaya, Jabra, and Cisco. He's a very known face. He was the president of Cisco India and SARC from 2014 to 17. Under him, Cisco significantly grew to over $1 billion. Prior to this, he was the managing director of for collaboration with Cisco, president for APJC for Jabra, and country president of Avaya in Korea and China for a period of 12 years. As the technical director for key solutions across APJC for AT&T, Lucent, and Avaya, he spent 3 years in research and development and built India's first public voicemail system. Oh, I didn't know that. Dinesh has been on the NASSCOM Executive Council and is currently the Learning Chair, OIPO Bangalore chapter. He has a bachelor degree degree in computers from Pune and an MBA from State University of New York in Buffalo. So very happy to have you here, Dinesh. Can I invite you to make your opening remarks, please?
Yeah, thank you, Sriram. Thanks very much. So I think that, there's never been a time like this where so much has been happening and, there hasn't been such an impetus to push forward the notion of how work will be conducted basically in the future, right? It was in June of this year that I published an article, which actually came out in the Forbes magazine as well, where I talked about the fact that this change is not because of COVID, or it's not only because, we had COVID and now, we're going to sort of for the short term start to figure out, how we're going to work, and then things will come back to normal. There are basically a dozen reasons why I feel that the future of work is such an important topic. And look, it can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. We have been working with companies all over the world. Actually, we've done deployments as Smarten spaces into about 20 countries now, only for the specific reason of helping them get back to work, helping them shift to what they call hybrid, right? So they want to move in a hybrid model. And so what is hybrid model and what is it going to take to make it a big success, right? Hybrid is about giving flexibility to employees on when, how they work, how many days they come in. But it's also about, basically for a company, this has to become more like a competitive advantage. I can tell you for the early movers, right, that are talking about hybrid and are actually putting in all the processes in place, because it's not easy. Sriram, the amount of change management you need to do when you're shifting from fixed time, fixed place to now, everybody's spread out, and obviously you're asking them to come back and work in hybrid because it's not easy working at home. It's been a couple of years now, and look, you can tell, right? In the beginning, it was great. Everything was getting sorted out. I feel there's a need to come back, even if it is for a couple of days a week. I think there's a need to come back because people want to work as teams. They want to engage, but coming back for the sake of coming back is not going to happen. I think that's old school thinking. I got to be there sitting in front of a desk and my managers to watch me. I think that's kind of gone, right? But people still want to work as teams. People want to collaborate, right? So they want to come, they want to have engagement. So giving them the knowledge of, well, who else is coming back to work, right? Who are the other people? Giving them choices of locations. We used to have this concept of everybody has to drive 2 hours from North Bangalore to Outer Ring Road, and it'll take you 3 hours to reach wherever, but you still have to come back all to the same place. I think that's the biggest driver of why people are saying, I want to work hybrid, because I'm tired of doing that. It's unproductive. It doesn't work for me anymore. So I think that's definitely one thing that kind of has to be factored in. Also, what has happened is during the pandemic, a lot of people moved outside, right? This whole thing of shifting away from the cities happened in a huge way. It happened in India. It's happened in basically in the US. And so that global phenomenon is also driving the need for us to rethink, how are these people that have moved out? Now, you can't certainly uproot them and ask them to come back to a central location, but how do you keep them engaged? How do you bring them into the workplace for specific things that are basically needed, right? If you can understand this, if you can be bold about making decisions, if you're willing to take it on and if you're willing to change, and you're willing to understand that the change is not going to be easy, and you're willing to look at the 7-8 things that are very important for what employees are looking for, I pity the role of the manager right now. Because for the manager, it used to be everybody's in front of them. They work in agile, they work in certain model, but all of a sudden now everybody's remote. I have no visibility. Everybody's got their video off and on mute. I don't know what's going on with my team, right? And so the role of the manager and the playbook, I love the word playbook, Sriram, because one of the things is you have to have a playbook for how the manager is going to manage the future of work, and it's still going to keep the employees productive and still deliver the results that they used to deliver. And I think it's also for the organization, right? Top to bottom, I can tell you with every customer we work, you have different types of people, right? Or different teams. Some say, oh no, for me, the only way it works is my team's got to come back. Some say, I need a couple of days a week because, and some say, I really don't care. I trust my team. I've given them all the tools. I know how to manage them. And look, it's not one size fits all, but you have to have a formula, and an individual playbook will be created by company on how they want to manage these different things. Future of work is here. We keep calling it the future of work. It's actually the new way to work is here. We have to embrace it. We have to understand the challenges. We have to educate ourselves. We have to do some experimentation, and we've got to be bold enough to move forward. For those who do that, I think it's a big competitive reason. And in the next section, I'd love to talk about the challenges we've seen with companies. So what are the 4 or 5 things that I think they're doing well as well? Thanks, Sriram.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dinesh, for those very, very pointed opening comments. I just love the way you said 2 things, right? One is, it's not no longer a future, it is actually here, right? And second is, it is about the boldness of organizations, leaders to make decisions and drive the change, right? We'll come back to it. I think we need to talk a lot more about it, right? So thank you so much. And I would like to introduce Jaswinder Ahuja, the next panelist. Maybe I'll introduce him shortly and then ask him to make his comments. Jaswinder, or Jesse as we fondly used to call him at Cadence. I think he is known as Jesse throughout the industry. He's a very seasoned executive with a proven track record of over 30 years in the technology industry, building and leading high-performance global organizations and delivering superior business results. Jesse holds a BTech in electronics from ITBHU, Varanasi, and an MS in computer science from computer engineering, from Northeastern University, Boston, and an executive MBA from Stanford. He was conferred the Lifetime Achievement Award by the VLSI Society of India in Jan 2018 to acknowledge his leadership and many noteworthy contributions to the semiconductor ecosystem in India. He's received the Distinguished Alumnus Award from ITBHU and is a member of the Honor Society of Phi Kappa Phi USA. Specializes in general management, strategy, business development, R&D, globalization, organization development and integration, operations. Jesse, of course, we all used to be in awe of you at Cadence, so I'm sure you're going to recreate that magic. So can I request you to make your opening comments?
Thanks, Sriram. Thank you for inviting me for this panel, and pleasure to have this opportunity and interact with the other panelists this evening rather, for your time. I'm presently in Ireland, so it's afternoon for me. If you look at what's happened through the pandemic, I'm a great example of how work and where you work has changed. I'm doing my job in India and here in Ireland, based out of Ireland, which, honestly speaking, if you'd asked the question 2 years ago, the answer would have been no. But today, anything is possible from anywhere. So again, Dinesh, you've done a good job of setting up the context. I think Dinesh's remarks are on point. I don't think any of the panelists are likely to have any disagreement on that, right? Panels become interesting when there is some tension and there's some disagreement, but it doesn't look like there's going to be any disagreement or much disagreement in this panel. But to add to what's already been said, let me just very quickly recap the journey that we've gone through at Cadence, right? At Cadence, we were in that category of people that believe that, we are all about people and innovation and collaboration, and that you had to be in a Cadence office to work. And while we are a global organization and we've got teams all across the globe, we still wanted people to, sort of co-located teams in locations to come to office, and we were not big proponents of work from home. Come the 17th of March, 2020, all of that changed when we made a decision as a company that said, people come first. People have always come first for Cadence, so that was nothing new. We said, given the situation we are in, and to protect the well-being of our people, we have no choice but to move to work from home. And so almost overnight, we made a decision to work from home. It's literally, I remember on 16th, I made the announcement. In India, for example, on 17th, they were told, pack your bags, go home. Tomorrow onwards, you're working from home. The first few months, obviously, as we all know, the expectation was this is going to be a few weeks and we'll soon come back to work. Very soon, we realized that it's not going to be that short. It might be a few months. So the first order of business was for us to provide infrastructure and support to our team to be able to work comfortably from home. That got done. And then we realized that it's going to be more than a few months. It'll be several months, maybe longer. And then there was a lot of learning that we had to go through as an organization in how to engage the employees, how to foster collaboration more closely, more tightly, leveraging technology and the tools that were available. The funny part is we realized that we always had access to those tools at Cadence, but nobody ever used them. And that's because we were all in the same office, so there was no need to use the technology. So we literally, rapidly learned how to use all the technology that we had access to and make the best use of it, again, to engage the employees, to foster teamwork, to foster collaboration in that remote setting. And of course, beyond that, the conversation changed to what lies ahead. And I agree with what Dinesh said. We don't think of it so much in terms of future of work. We think of it in terms of what's the new normal that we are entering, right? And without doubt in our mind, there's a few characteristics of the new normal. Number one, it will be hybrid. Number two, it will all be around offering flexibility of choice to the employees. I think people have gotten used to working from home for the last 15, 18 months. We can't just tell them, come back to the office. You have to come back to the office. So it has to be more based on choice, the flexibility of choice for people. The third thing is, again, I think I like the word that we are using. It's all about reimagining the workplace. And the way I like to look at it is the work that we do can be done from anywhere. We can do it from home. We can do it from hometown. We can do it from the beach. It doesn't matter. We need to be much more deliberate about when and why people need to come into the so-called workplace. And just to make it easier in terms of how to approach and how to think about it, the way I like to look at it is think of the office as the new offsite, right? In the past, everybody used to come every day to work in the office. And then from time to time, we would take the team offsite with a very specific, clear purpose in mind, with an agenda in mind, what we want to accomplish, why people need to be there. I think we pretty much have to think of the office as the offsite and get people to come into the office more with the purpose of interacting with each other, build culture building for the organization, bonding with the team members, collaboration, brainstorming, and be more deliberate both for teams as well as cross teams as an organization. And beyond that, it's going to be complete flexibility to the individual and the employee in terms of how they want to get their job done. Obviously, it has many downstream implications in terms of how we function as a company. For example, again, as I mentioned, for us, we are a very people-centric organization. Employees are number one priority for us. So with that, one of the risks is if some people regularly come into the office and some people work from home, we run the risk of creating an in-group and an out-group, right? And the out-group becomes naturally disadvantaged. And I'm afraid to make the statement, but it is more likely going forward that there'll be more women in the so-called out-group because they will tend to choose to work from home for various reasons, right? Which impacts our corporate initiative around promoting diversity. So we need to learn how to strike the right balance to make sure that nobody is disadvantaged. I'm just putting that as a thought on the table so that we are all very conscious and deliberate about it. And again, to a point that Dinesh made, right? I mean, when you're on a video conference, you don't know what's going on because people will turn off the video and be on mute. Dinesh, one of the rules that I enforce with my team is when we are having a meeting, everybody needs to be on video. No exceptions, right? Everybody needs to be on video. And yes, of course, if they need to, they can put themselves on mute if they're concerned around background noise. But we are sensitive to the fact that it's not so much that they are working from home. It's more like we are imposing on their personal and family life by asking them to work from home. And we need to be sensitive to the environment that they're working on. So again, this is a very, very broad topic. We could go on for hours and hours. There's so much to discuss and share. But I think I'll pause at that and give it back to you, Sriram, so that we can move forward with the discussion.
Very interesting comments, Jesse. I think basically stolen a little bit of thunder from the playbook we are planning to write, because we were exactly planning to elaborate and record some of these things, offices and offsite, and how to be deliberate and show a lot of intentionality in culture building in the remote world, right, or in the hybrid world, right? So I'm really looking forward to come back to you on some of these topics where we can double click, right? So good. So I will move on to our next member, Professor Chandrasekhar Sripada, Professor Chandra for short. Professor Chandra works across a portfolio of offerings in education, research, teaching, facilitation, board level governance, and corporate advisory services as his second career. After 40 years of work in human resource management across public, private, and multinational companies, so long career, very stellar one. As a CHRO, he has led human capital strategies and partnered with CEOs and top teams in major companies like IBM, Capgemini, Reliance, and IIT. Starting as a management trainee with SAIL, he retired as Global Chief Human Resource Officer at Dr. Reddy's in Hyderabad. As an academic, Chandra pursues interdisciplinary studies and applied research. His interests and work are focused on gaining practical insights at the intersection of human capital, talent, and business strategies. As a leadership coach and facilitator, he works with top teams in building self-awareness through mindfulness practices for effective personal transformation and team collaboration. His areas expertise includes human capital strategy, leadership development, board governance, top team coaching, alignment, HR advisory, and new age people practices. Research interests are the areas of human capital strategies and practices for digital economy. Right? So you're perhaps the right person to be on this panel and talk about the future work. So Professor, can I invite you to share your opening thoughts?
Yeah, no. Thank you, Sriram. I think both Dinesh and Jaswinder have covered a large number of issues. I will try and respond to an interesting comment that was made that panel discussions can become very boring if everyone agreed with everyone. And so may I try, with your permission, to create, if not disagreement, provocation. And obviously I'll do that with the liberties that we professors take with themes that are given to us. Like someone very rightly said, I mean, Jaswinder, that we are not discussing the future of work. We are actually discussing the present of work, which has been forced upon us. So let me make a few comments on that, and then also about the future of work. The present of work is as ad hoc a response to work as the past of work, in the sense that when we went to offices like addicts, by the way, in the large arc of human history, offices have just 300 years of history. Before that, people were not going to a place called office. And it's just that in the recent times, we thought offices are a nice place to enjoy, recreate, eat, get massages in salons and compete with each other in attracting employees who can't be otherwise attracted because youngsters have very crowded homes and expensive pubs. So we might recreate them in the name of office. So we actually made an interesting use of office, more like trying to build a second alternative to more exciting life. And we were not sure actually if we were getting any work done. And my view is that we have romanticized the office quite a lot. So all my speakers in every panel I join tell me that, look, we are now going back to office because we will build culture, because we will build innovation, because we will allow collaboration, And without the office, these things won't happen. I have spent 40 years lamenting with all such senior CEOs that when we were at the peak of office, there was no collaboration. There was no innovation, not enough. And there was no evidence that office was either causing it or not causing it. And we just believed that because we like hi-fi and we like gossip and networking, we like water cooler serendipity, we believe that we will go to office to create collaboration. Why were we then doing all these team building exercises for decades when offices were at their best and people were congregating there, struggling through traffic? Where was teamwork? Where was innovation? Where was culture? Why are we going back like addicts to the office? Because believing that if we went there, we would redo all that magically, which we never did for the last several years. Now come to the hybrid. Even the hybrid work is an ad hoc response. The work from home was an ad hoc response because COVID induced a health concern. People thought if they got together, they will die. So to protect themselves, they stayed at home. Technology helped. People got suddenly realized that actually a lot of work they were doing can be easily done from the home or any other location. So it's nice that people at least didn't question the productivity issue. Most leaders were grudgingly allowing people and considering it as a favor to allow them to work from home. Like even in this talk said that we got converted. We were not believing in work from home and this event converted us. Interestingly, the social experiment has succeeded. There is enough evidence in research now to say that a lot of white collar work can be done very productively from home or from non-office locations. Having said that, now we have a new need. And the need is we must socialize, we must interact, etc. Why only in the office? Not sure why in the office, because there are lots of non-office opportunities for people to network, socialize. We could build, all the offices could move away and we could build parks there. We could add to greenery and we could add to so many other things that the society really needs as carbon emissions reduce. And we could make much better an ecosystem for remote work to work. And we know that the elements of remote work to work is there. And this kind of ad hoc responses, suddenly believing that this is a new normal, then saying, no, we will go back to office. Then after some time saying that, no, actually, we don't not sure whether people are working, so it's better that we go back. I don't know in all our responses, there is any thoughtfulness. This is not about future of work. Now, let me tell you what is the future of work that we should be discussing. As we tactically pass through all these issues and finally get all them, if employers have their way, I assure you they will go back to have people under their nose in spite of all the usual talk, because a lot of employers seem to support in some of the, I like some of these non-hypocritical big bosses of banking system who have said that you don't come, I'll fire you. And some of the others were more considerate are saying, okay, we will woo you back. By the way, that's the usual current thing. And behind that, the statement is, we would love to see you back and have you under our nose. Now, I wouldn't expect anything more because there are three things about the future of work that we haven't even thought about. First thing is the future of work, from speaking from a very conceptual, philosophical, and abstract point of view, in human history and evolution, is less work, no work. Man's struggle with work is to overcome work, at least work the way we have been slaving around doing work, which is why I think one of the most important inventions of current times is robots, and that man's new system of getting away from work, the drudgery of work, would be probably taken over by an alternative called the robot. So anyway, the future of work is about engineering work to be not as much work as it is today. And that can happen if three things can be built upon. Our leaders, our current thought processes are not ready. They are still struggling between two poor alternatives called work from home or work from office. These are both very, very poor alternatives. What should leaders focus on in case they want work to be less work? One is autonomy. The future of work is autonomy. What people are asking for is autonomy. There are lots of problems with the organizational processes that we have built that do not provide autonomy to people. And people will seek more autonomy. In fact, career-oriented employment is almost a no-no for a lot of youngsters because they think, to use their language, work sucks. That's their language, by the way. You should talk to the youngsters to know what they think of us, the oldie foggies who have built these huge hierarchies and bossism and creating complete stifling environments in the name of experience and process. Two, the future of work is about creating significance and meaning and identity to people, an effort on which we have been only partially successful. And if these two things have to be kept in mind, a lot has to change in how we lead, how we manage, and how we envision the future of work and organizations, not as merely tactical things about who should come on what day to work, but a much bigger issue of whether work should be at all conducted in the manner it is conducted today. There's much more that I can say. If I have provoked, I would be happy. Thank you.
Wow. Professor Chandra, thanks for striking the discordant note, right? Then Jesse said the panel discussion, if they all agree, it'll get very uninteresting and boring. So I think, I'm very happy that you have a different worldview. I think
I have agreed with them, by the way.
I completely
as their current discussion around work is absolutely true.
I think that's what will make the next 40 minutes very interesting, right? And I'm also personally very satisfied that you bailed out my choice as the moderator of picking a diverse panel, right? I didn't fall into the trap of picking exactly similar minds, right? Thank you, Professor. We'll come back and explore some of these questions in much more detail. I know some of those are in my list as well, right? I only hope that we have time, right? I would now like to move on to Rajul Mathur. Rajul Mathur from Willis Towers Watson. Rajul is an engineer from IIT Roorkee and an MBA from the prestigious IIM Ahmedabad. He has very rich experience in the field of consultancy as business advisory to client service delivery. Rajul leads HR consulting, talent and rewards business for Towers Watson in India. Rajul's focus is to grow the G&R business and deliver superior customer value. He brings in a lot of experience, 20 plus years of experience in this area. Earlier, he was co-founder and partner with Talentonic, a boutique change management and technology firm. He's worked in integrating the business solutions with implementation inputs through people. Rajul also has designed online tools for 360-degree and board evaluations. Prior to that, he was a client service director with Grant Thornton, where he was one of the founding members of the business advisory team. He led the Pan-India HR advisory practice for them. Prior to joining GT, he led the performance consulting vertical in the talent and organizational consulting arm of Aon Hewitt. He also has experience of working with Reliance Industries in the petrochemical complex before his management. Welcome, Rajul, and can you please enlighten us with your opening remarks?
I think, thank you, Sriram, so much, and thank you for having me on the panel. Earlier, when I actually walked into this panel, I thought, I had significant experience, but now I've realized, the folks that I'm speaking after have got 40 years of experience and have got professorial backgrounds. They've done research. So my experience would be more practical in terms of what I'm hearing my clients say, and less maybe coming from the wisdom experience that a lot of my co-panelists bring across. See, what I've seen over the last, if I may say, 1.5 years or so, this whole definition of remote working and the conversation on future of work. So, and I agree with Professor Chandra here, that the whole conversation of this, future of work was actually happening before pandemic struck. And that was exactly the point of how can we divide or how can we distinguish what work is into tasks, then look at each of those tasks to say, whether it can be automated, whether it can be given to a gig worker, and what is that essential part of the task that needs to be done within the organization. And those aspects that still required to be done within the organization would form the future role of individuals within the organization. A lot will go to gig workers. Some, a good 40-45% would also go to technology. Now, in this scenario, and this is all pre-pandemic that I am talking about, where we presented papers in the World Economic Forum and others, we had realized that, the pace at which this whole technology change would come across, say, for example, was X rate. What the pandemic has done in the last 1.5 years is, it has suddenly done two things. One, it has opened the minds of leadership and management towards accepting that change. And therefore, the rate at which now these changes can happen are much significant. If I would have asked in January of 2019, that most of the people can work from home, and this would be like a running successful model, nobody would have agreed. Nobody would have agreed for even 20%. Forget the 100% that we are talking about right now. So it did bring across a change in the minds of people. What our research also at that time in 2019 also showed, that the roles would become much more meatier and more cerebral than the pure operational repeat routine kind of roles, which would be taken away by technology. And even within those specialist area, there would be that deep area that will go to gig workers. So, and therefore the element that would be left would be a very different role as compared, which would require a very different skill as compared to what we were typically looking at from an organization perspective. Now, this, when we were taking it to organizations, was very esoteric to everyone. Now we talk about this, everybody listens to us with this, with whatever has happened over the background over the last 15 to 16 months. So this is like pre-pandemic. Let me now talk about pandemic. So pandemic was something which was thrust upon all of us. And organizations, leaders, individual employees had their own journey of struggle in this. And they all found their own sweet spot. And they all found their own method of getting to the success on this. Organizations initially realized that it would hit them very hard, but realized, the costs go down and there is a benefit on profitability. So everyone on one side was doing all the calculations on the financial side to look at profitability. The other side, they were looking at measures to, somehow bring back business or maybe further cut on certain areas of cost, which, by the way, they were not allowed to do in the past. So a lot of efficiency actually got in. Organizations actually liked it. And when the business started picking in during the pandemic period itself, everyone started talking about productivity, and the organizations became more comfortable than, say, for example, the leaders, the management, the managers, or the employees per se. If I look at the managerial population, which is the mid segment, they were really pushed on both sides. And for them, the whole experience have been the toughest one. On one side, the leadership skill that we've taught them, if I may say so, in terms of succeeding in organizations, had suddenly gone through a change. And like it was pointed out, now the leadership was happening at the action where the transaction or where the business was happening. So you can't sit in your own home and direct somebody who's actually trying to do a sale process for you or trying to do an operations for you. So the distribution of leadership or the delegation of leadership happened automatically to the places where the action was happening. Now the leaders were not attuned to this and were not comfortable with this. They had less control on the decision making, but they had all the power. So how do you actually manage a situation where you're used to all the decision making, all the power, directing people in front of your eyes, to suddenly, wherever the action is happening, you're aloof from that action and still wanting to control everything. And the capabilities that were required to succeed in such environment were around more agility, were around resilience, were around empathy. So some leaders found their own sweet spot as they navigated this. Some struggled. The alpha male really struggled, if I may say so, in terms of leadership, where they were all at the top of everything. And suddenly leadership also realized that there are so many of these great leaders sitting in different pockets within their organizations whom they had never witnessed. Because right now performance actually became more distributed and they were seeing these outcomes coming from different places. So that was this, the second bucket, the managerial bucket. The organization was pushing them, the employees were pushing them. So they were in the struggle phase of what to do, how to do, and how do I build my capability to be able to deliver in this new world. The third segment is the employee segment. Now, by the generation of employees, we had different reactions. If I look at the younger lot amongst the employees, they initially really loved the idea of working from home. but started getting troubled by the fact that where is my experience of, like it was called out, where are my clubs in office? Where are my, those parties in office? Where is that whole social interaction going? So they were in these two boats. I'm liking one part of it, but definitely not liking the other part of it. So how do I get my social interaction back, my parties back, which was all paid by the firm, my sports back, my billiards back, and companies had gone beyond their means to actually satisfy some of those requirements. But now you're all sitting in a room. Maybe you were staying in a chamri where there were 3 or 4 people along with you. How do you just manage to stay within those 4 or 5 people, not getting all those benefits? But they were liking the other side of complete independence of, waking up just at the meeting time, switching on, switching off whenever they wanted, and just being accountable for their kind of work, which is something that they like first of all. So, I do my piece of work and then I forget about it, is what typically the young generation looks at. And I would then be celebrated for the piece of work that I've done and brought to the table. The second was the mid-age segment, which was in the middle positions, the managers. They were pushed by the side on their organizations to look at profitability. They were letting go of their power and authority. They were being pushed by employees who were very comfortable with that system and would switch on, switch off. And they were struggling with the leadership capabilities that they were taught in the past. And they had their personal responsibilities of managing 50% of the domestic work, which they never were used to do. So they were in a tight situation. They were also worried about longevity of the job. For them, a continuous stream of income also made a lot of sense. The leadership actually, if I may say so, the top leadership positions from an employee perspective were busy in generating work for others. Earlier, they were part of the discussions, but they also, a lot of leaders actually allowed the next levels to work independently. The others actually created more work for them as they were sitting in their ivory towers. So the situation, if you look at learning from a pandemic perspective, each went through their own cycles and have adjusted to that in some reality. So when I look at the future of work from the lens of where we were thinking from a theory on 2019 perspective, there is more awareness, there is more readiness, but the concern that most of the people have highlighted is once the office coming resumes, would I let go of the habit that I had of preferring people who were sitting in front of me vis-a-vis people who are not sitting in front of me? And would I be able to not discriminate between the two sets purely by the fact that they're closer to me and not being remote? So that's one challenge that I see. I think on the technology side, we've seen progress, but I think it's not, there was a lot of excitement and openness, but the translation into reality is still taking time. It's not gone at the 3x pace, like the 3x awareness has happened. It's still moved at like 20-30% more pace. The acceptability has increased. If I look at the young population, they are like resisting going back to work. If you look at all these large organizations in US, especially the technology firms, they are resisting that. In fact, they feel the freedom that they got here, along with the benefits of office, if they're able to get. That's the sweet spot for them. So give me my freedom as I am in the independent space, but give me the benefits that I'm used to in the office, and I will marry the two. And that's my concoction in terms of going forward. So those would be, my comments from an opening perspective.
That is their hybrid definition. Good. I think I was reminded of, Krish Ashok from TCS speaking in our previous panel. And he made a point very similar to what you said. He said, it is the extroverts who were managers struggled the most with doing this change. And suddenly he saw the introverted leaders performing better because actually they could orchestrate this better, right? And, because so much of their personality did not come into the forefront, but it was basically their methods and processes and structured engagement that helped them sail through. Good. I think now that we are done with the opening comments from panelists, I think I would like to go around the panel with a few questions, with a few topics. Right? I definitely agree to what Dinesh, Jesse, and the other panelists also mentioned is future work is not really created with the pandemic. I think it was basically a theme which got heavily accelerated or came into focus because of the pandemic. I would like to go take one step back and see what are the business transformations which basically are at play, which are also pushing us to reimagine work, right? For example, I really want to understand, how you see some of these things, right? Like, for example, decentralized payments, the crypto, is it challenging the traditional hierarchical control of organizations? Organizations for long have been built by financial control mechanisms, which were the linchpin or the backbone, right? What does that mean? New ubiquitous consumerization, AI, ML, IoT. So is there parallelly, is there a lot of business transformation happening, which is also pushing us to think differently in terms of what work is today, right? So, Jesse, would you like to?
Sure. So, Sriram, there's a couple of different things, right? I mean, the trends that you describe have been at play for some time. We talk about, from Cadence's perspective, we said there are 4 or 5 major trends that are driving the broader industry. There is obviously artificial intelligence, machine learning. There is IoT. There is 5G, which helps transmit the data. So IoT generates data. 5G helps transmit that data. Big investment in hyperscale computing helps you process that data. AI, ML is how you process the data, and so on and so forth. So these are big trends that are playing out right now that are going to impact our work, our life, etc., in a very profound manner. Having said that, is any of that related to the pandemic, or has the pandemic made any major impact there? At least from our vantage point, we don't see it. In terms of how it may impact organizations and how organizations function, and you gave the example of financial controls. One of the things that I have always observed is the rate at which technology develops and matures and the rate at which it gets adopted in mainstream are very different. And typically what impedes the adoption of technology are things that are beyond technology. It is in the realm of ethics, regulations, and so on and so forth, right? We can argue, for example, if we take an example, autonomous cars, one can argue that the technology is there, right? Yeah. The technology, well, it's debatable, right? I would say it's good enough, but some people may say it's not, but it's a debatable topic. But we don't see autonomous cars, at least what they call level 5 autonomy, which is full autonomous cars, becoming a reality for many years to come. And what's holding it back? It's insurance and liability concerns, it's government regulations, it's things like that, right? There is so much more that can be done with use of technology, but again, with its privacy, its ethics, its regulations. So again, the same thing will happen here, right? You talked about financial controls. I think, will the tax laws and will the government regulations change fast enough for organizations to fundamentally shift the way they work because of these technologies coming online? So I think there is a lag there. There is a lag there, and it's hard to predict when some of this stuff will have a transformational impact and become mainstream, because you just can't predict how the other side is going to evolve and track, and that's usually the slower piece.
Good. No, I completely hear your differentiation and nuancing between technology development and technology adoption, and therefore their impact on changing the nature of work and shifting the ground, right? So Dinesh, I would like to have your views, because you've run large technology companies, and you're doing a tech venture now. So how do you see the bigger business transformations happening? And you also meet a lot of clients, I'm presuming, in the space. So would you like to share your thoughts on the correlation between the two?
So I'll start with the technology piece, Sriram, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Look, the reason why we were able to get through the last, 12, 15 months, I think technology has a huge role to play. I think technology evolved so quickly. The first day when things started to, kind of go a little south, I was here in Singapore and we had to shut our office down. We got introduced to Zoom. The problem was, okay, now, I don't have a great background. Then backgrounds came in, then voice quality got better. Then you could take it from your phone. Everybody upgraded their networks. Wi-Fi got better. People started to make it very easy to serve you things you needed at home. I need food. Click, somebody comes in, delivers it. So tech really has, I've never seen, and I've been in tech for a while. I've never seen this kind of rapid development and adoption as that has happened, because that's the only way that we went through this, right? Look, it's going to continue. I think the evolution of cloud, the evolution of AI, the evolution of IoT is going to evolve into a much faster pace, and it has true business impact. How do you still manage? You talked about business, right? What are the business imperatives? So what's the number one business imperative? Productivity. If your people are not productive, you're not going to grow as a company. And so are there tools available for productivity? I mean, we're a tech company ourselves. And so we use everything from Jira, where tickets get logged, to service requests that go out, to, collaboration tools, to all kinds of tools. But I've never felt that anybody on the team got disadvantaged and we were able to keep up with the business productivity, basically side of it. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges in people making a decision of what is the future of work is going to be, if productivity has been so damn good, right? Do I really need to change? Is it really bothering me? Hand on heart, right? If somebody said today, oh, let's run back to the office, people will be like, okay, well, let me think about that, right? And so there's definitely, that whole, and productivity is a great measure, right? Because it tells you how good your organization. Second thing has been hiring and recruiting. Try to hire a candidate and tell him, hey, tomorrow morning you need to be on a plane from your native in Madhya Pradesh, and you have to be in the office sitting in front of me in Bangalore. Well, good luck with that, right? The hiring, the needs of the employees have changed. They have evolved. They have proven that they can do this from where they are. You give them the right tools, they've got the ability to manage it, right? So I think clearly that's something that basically has worked out. But companies that work in hybrid, companies that sort of adopted, one big business imperative is their ability to hire talent and nurture talent, right? And I think coming back to the technology side, if you want to manage productivity, people retention and hiring, if you want to manage, the ability to keep culture going, I feel you have to be much bolder in adopting tech. I think Jaswinder is absolutely right. Tech is moving super fast, right? Are we adopting it fast enough? I think the biggest differentiator between companies who think about the future of work and who actually act on it is, of course, the policies, the culture, but it's also the adoption of technology. How quickly are you willing to, how bold are you in diverting funds into deploying tech? And I'll tell you, we work with some of the largest companies in the world, Fortune 100, 500 companies. And typically to buy our technology for hybrid work, they would take 6 months to a year. There'd be an RFP process, security check. Today, it probably has been cut down to 6 weeks. And so there is a way to get it done. People put a budget, there's a CEO mandate, they put cross-functional teams, silos have been broken down, organizational silos, right? Of procurement versus HR versus CIO, and coming together, making a decision and moving forward. And there are companies that are doing it. So honestly, if you want to manage your business imperatives, you want to obviously get this right, I feel defining the goals, playbook, and the adoption of technology is going to be a huge play. And the bold companies are doing it. So either you get left behind or you kind of figure out a way to move faster. That's all.
Sure. No, I agree with you 100%, Dinesh. I think it is about adoption, it is about the boldness, and it is about the agility to really make the change. So, Professor, I want to come to you and put this question slightly differently, right? I think you made this point, and even in some of my earlier conversations with people who are interested in this subject, they've held a view that the current work structure, the organization, the hierarchy, the command, control, everything is basically a product of the Industrial Revolution, right? Because we wanted certain types of control, we wanted certain outcomes, and therefore the best suited was this kind of hierarchical control, right? So were you implying in your opening remark that this needs to change, and is there a fundamental change in the way business is getting done today? The transformation of the brick and mortar businesses. Somebody even said these days science is not at the center stage of making decisions, but feelings are. So it's basically reflective of heavy consumer bias in how businesses are being run and done, right? So would you want to talk about it a little bit? Is that what you meant in your opening remark?
Yeah. No, I may have meant some very esoteric stuff, but I realize that they are far above the current remit. So let me come back to the down-to-earth issues that we are all concerned. Are organizations transforming? The answer is yes. Is there an impact of the pandemic partly and the acceleration of digitalization and technology, which is making organizations transform? I think the answer is a robust yes. And it's happening all over the world in all types of organizations. Earlier, technology used to be largely for tech companies. Obviously, now it is for everyone. It's embedded everywhere. So I see it the way organizations are changing, and your question is what's transforming and what will transform more. In the way typically we speak, let me say there are 5 Ds of COVID that I see that impact the organizational transformation. The first one is digitalization. Debates around the speed of adoption could be still there. For some, there is this common saying that what would have taken 10 years has now taken 1 year. But for some others who are at the other end of technology, they still think that we are ancient and there is a lot more that we can do. And both are true. At any point of time, there is a continuum of progress that happens. But overall, the acceleration of adoption of technology has happened. And that has led to a major implication to organizations to gradually transform from being these monolithic siloed hierarchies, like the previous speaker said, to become more platforms where people come and do businesses and move on. And we all know that the platform model of the organization is the in thing and the hottest thing. And everyone is actually building more a platform than a brick and mortar organization. And because of the ease it provides for a number of stakeholders to come and transact and create value, I think the model of platform is an interesting new development, which is accelerated by the pandemic. The model of networking as opposed to hierarchical silos is another organizational structure and design change that is happening. And many companies are adopting this. Within the large companies that we know, these things are happening. And many new companies that are getting born with no legacy of the old structure. And you can see that in many startups and many types of new organizations. The second D is distribution. Obviously, the workforce is distributed. Supply chains are getting distributed. Somewhere in your note, you talked about hub and spoke. We clearly are suddenly woken up to the fact that we were too constrained by 1 or 2 countries holding us like this, for the supply chain. So everywhere in their own version, Atmanirbhar is growing. And in all countries, if any, will be more and more inward looking and more trying to build distributed models of access to both talent as well as material and key resources. The next D is devolution of power, devolution of authority, and to the lowest common person. And people are realizing that it is impossible to control things from the top. And you got to decide, when finally people, the nurse and the third grade doctor had to decide whom to give the oxygen. Is it the 80-year-old person or the 40-year-old person? That decision could not have been taken by the Minister of Health or the Director of Health Affairs. It had to be taken by those who had to take it. And it's metaphorically a reassertion of the fact that unless you empower the bottom of the organization and devolve power, you cannot do. And pandemic combined with the enablement of technology has certainly made our realization sharper and our internalization of this change easier. And the next D is that of democratization, where the employee voice is much stronger. You will see that the employers, the amount of wooing, consultation, surveys, and democratic ways of reaching out to employees, and the inclusive discussion that's happening, that we should not create out groups, in groups. We should try to get people from all parts. We should give them flexibility. This new tone is certainly a very different tone from what it was just a few years ago. And this is the rise of democratization, and employees will walk away. They have walked away from Google workstations across the world. It is not as though tech organizations cannot have unions. I can tell you that there is a trend towards employee having a voice, both collectively, and if the mainstream organization doesn't deal with it, the social media will deal with it. And it's the glass door which will decide your fate. And therefore, there is greater consultation, inclusion, participation, and all that happening in the organization. And the last one is disruption. People have realized one of the interesting things that has happened is, apart from the pandemic, during the peak of the pandemic, the voice, the whole concern around climate has also become very, very high. And many, many corporate leaders are realizing that the disruption we saw in pandemic is not the last or the most difficult one. In fact, the disruption that will happen if there is really climate crisis, which is already happening, would be far, far higher. So disruption is now a way of life. So what has that done? Apart from the ad hoc ability to send a desktop home and manage the backup, business continuity and preparing not for change and transformation, but preparing for disruption. And the ability to ensure, smooth organizational processes and work and productivity in spite of all kinds of disruption is certainly a major concern today, both in risk managers and in CEOs. I think, therefore, to your question, there is a transformation happening. Pandemic has accelerated it. Digitalization will actually bring the right turbocharging of that. Organizations that won't change will perish.
Sure, absolutely. No, I will remember the 5 Ds. That's a very useful mnemonic to think about it. So I want to slightly change gears and bring in Rajul with all the consulting that he does with talent, etc. Professor talked about democratization of the workforce. I think in our previous discussion as well, we talked a lot about democratization of workforce. The key question in my mind, I'm really trying to find an answer to is the employee-employer relationship paradigm changing? Do you see the employee making a lot more decisions today as to how workplace, workspace should be? I mean, somebody said, like the employee carries his resume with him, he carries his work environment with him. I don't know. Are we talking about true democratization of? Are we seeing early signs of that? And somebody said, it is democratization with skills as a currency with the employee, right? So we are hearing a lot about role and opportunity-based hiring instead of hierarchy-based hiring, right? So Rajul, do you want to throw some light because this is an area where you are closely associated?
Sure. In fact, I would just like to add one comment on the technology debate as well.
Sure.
I get on to your question. I think one of the differences that I'm seeing with the adoption of technologies, the earlier technology was used to improve efficiency, and that was the main driver. Now technology is used as part of main value creation. So that's the difference between the two. So now it is inherent to the business model that you have. And therefore, technology is no longer a bottom line addition requirement or simplifying a process requirement. It's core to your business model, and companies which are able to take it as core to the business model will be the ones who would end up with significant benefits both on the top line and on the bottom line, as compared to companies which are only taking it to operational efficiency or problem solving purposes in terms of technology adoption. So a lot of technology adoption in the past was for the reason that I stated later on. But now a lot of how do I create new business models by adopting technology? How do I, capture a wider market by bringing in technology at play? So which is all that digital buying that we do. We are actually capturing audience which we never had. So all that e-commerce is actually is an outcome of technology adoption. Even in HR, do I really need to go, if I need to hire 30,000 people, do I really need to go to those 500 or 400 campuses to do that hire? Or can I actually just do a bot-based interview to reduce that number so significantly that when I do my ratio of final selection to interview is becoming like 1:2 rather 1:10 that I used to earlier live with, which is truly changing the business model per se. So I think that's the play that technology has brought us. It's not incremental or problem solving. It's part of the business model. So that is my comment with respect to technology. The second part in terms of, so is the voice of the employee becoming bigger, and therefore the power that the employee had is becoming bigger or not? The answer is yes. So like Professor also said, any democratization, any decision making that goes to the edge where the work is happening. And I think that example of the doctor actually deciding on oxygen is a very, very solid example and a very powerful example to state. If that is the place where decision making is happening, that is where the calls would start getting taken up. So you would immediately know who are the doctors at the end level who are taking the right calls versus not the right calls. So, and you also mentioned the introvert leader versus the not so introvert. Now the uniform yardstick is only performance, and irrespective of what it brought across in terms of extrovertness or introvertness. So that currency will definitely become bigger. What we are also seeing from the vantage point that I am in with respect to a lot of compensation data that we have, organizations now don't do compensation benchmarking based on roles only. They have started looking at premiums attached to certain skills. And some of these skills like, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud, Hadoop, and so on and so forth, they carry a premium irrespective of the same title. So if I'm a software engineer in one of these areas, I would carry a premium on my job. Now, and that the organizations are realizing, and they're asking for the extent of premium based on the role that I'm doing. And that is happening in the market. So each role has its own merit, and each skill therefore has its own differentiation that is getting brought into the question as we discuss more in terms of whether careers or progression on monetary parameters. I think the challenge that the organizations would have with more democratization would be, and therefore the choice at the end of employees. Do I really need to, wed myself with only one firm? Or can I actually switch from firm A, firm B, firm C as during the course of my day to say that, I like to work in this area. Firm A requires me in the morning, firm B requires me in the evening, or, in those special project periods. And therefore this whole question of, should I be a gig worker versus should I actually, and therefore work on what I want to do and how I want to live my life versus what my company dictates to me. But not, so this is a very specialized population who's got most of these skills. They will continue to have these choices, and they will continue to exercise more of these choices, and will get into the cream of the gig workforce. There is a large population in India which continues to still get comfort from the continuity of jobs, will continue to move in that spectrum of being more independent, more accountable, but would still like to wed themselves to a particular firm because that is how they feel comfort in terms of their paychecks on a month-on-month basis. And that's a distinct reality in a market like India, where, we've just started moving from mid-90s to today, from being a place where, the needs and the requirements and the aspirations were very different. So that spectrum will still continue to remain. The final point would be in terms of, so where does that really take us as an organization? And I think the answer to that would be, the organizations will still have to create those communities of these gig workers if they really want to progress. Because eventually gig workers would start liking working with one set of people, and that is the community that they will belong to. So even if you look at the democratization of all the platforms that we end up watching a content of a type that we like and not of another type that we like. So even on a work front, these gig workers would create those communities, and they would be comfortable working with those communities and take those challenges. So the organizations would have to manage two types of workforce. One is the workforce within, and two is the workforce outside, which is a reality going forward in the future. And how do you continuously capture feedback on both the sides and remodel yourself in terms of these two sets of workforce?
Absolutely. Very, very pertinent points. So let me just switch gears a little bit, and I'm also mindful of time. I think we just have another 10 minutes or so, and I saw a message from Jesse that he has to drop off a couple of minutes early. So from the philosophical point of what is driving the change in the work, and what are the philosophical moorings of the employee-employee relationship, I want to kind of switch, because a lot of leaders and a lot of organizations really are today very anxious about, am I prepared to navigate this? Am I ready? How ready am I? And am I addressing all the questions? Some of the questions in their minds are, how should I do my communication, right? To kind of keep and win and keep the trust of employees, right? How should I design my hybrid? I mean, at least 3 of the 4 panel members here, are fairly in sync about the hybrid is here to stay. So how should I design my hybrid? I mean, does it, is there a formula or a template saying that if you're an engineering innovation organization, you could go to this kind of hybrid? If you're a consulting services company, you could go, there are a lot of different hybrid designs, right? The location design, the role-based hybrids, the week of the day, days of the week based hybrid, location-based, project-based, etc., right? So I would like some of you, maybe starting with Dinesh, can you share some learnings or insights very briefly on some of these things, which I think people would like to listen and benefit? I also see some questions similar to this in the chat box. I think Dinesh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that was the most used button, I think, for the longest time. But I was just saying that, firstly, Professor Chandra, I just want to say the 5 Ds were spot on, right? So I think what you called out as the 5 Ds are actually very, very true. And I think just talking about hybrid, because that was the point that we were making and some of the learnings that we've had, I feel that, firstly, I think it depends on organizational mindset. I don't think it's for every organization. I feel there are some companies that, will continue to work in the traditional manner because that has worked for them in the past, and, they just did it during this time and they'll come out of it. I think for the rest, one interesting thing has been that thanks to Zoom and the webinars and everything that happened, there's been so much education, right? Today, when you talk to a person or an organization, their maturity level on understanding is actually very high, because there's so much learning and sharing going on. I mean, just on this panel, right, we're sharing with each other, and every day there are different companies that are coming out and voicing out what has worked for them, what has not worked for them, right? So they are bringing that out, basically in the open, which never happened in the past, by the way. We never had these kind of forums to be able to hear what are others doing, right? So I think that really has sort of helped. And for the companies that invested into that effort in kind of getting that sorted out, I think it has really helped them out. Second learning that I've had is that, at the end of the day, the organizational structures that continue to work in the old way struggled a little bit. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies and CEOs we work with, they've reorganized themselves. The old world of technology in one silo and HR another and workplace another, and I think that is kind of going away because it is interconnected. The way you will get this right is the workplace is connected to employee engagement, which used to be an HR or continues to be an HR function, which is connected to the technology adoption and making sure that, people have what they need, to health and wellness, which used to be another area that's now been plugged in. So it's a uniform strategy, and each one of them have been interlinked basically together. So that has been a huge learning. I've not seen that before. I think that's clearly sort of changing. And then last but not the least, I think I'm a firm believer that, technology, if understood properly, if used for all the right business reasons, is going to be the one differentiator between how organizations adopt hybrid and are successful or fail in it in meeting their business objectives. So, these are the 4 kind of learnings that I've seen, which have been common, and no one size fits all. There'll be so many variations, but the themes are kind of well understood, right?
Sure. I think we may all agree, disagree, and have different points of view on hybrid, future of work, etc. But I think there is a very good consensus, not just in this panel, but outside also as well, as to technology is the most indispensable, right? It is becoming the platform, the glue, the backbone, or the substratum on which the business exists today. It's no longer an add-on automation efficiency tool, right? Okay, so let me just quickly move on the table. Maybe Jesse, if you can share your experience, insight, and knowledge, this thing about learnings about designing the hybrid and making it work.
Yeah, so I think the point's well made that there is no one size fits all depending on your business, the nature of your organization's culture, the way your leadership team, the way you manage. It's going to be different for different teams. So to pick one point that Dinesh just made, right, around the fact that you can't operate in silos. Well, we had that realization at Cadence several years ago, and we, as part of our corporate initiatives, we coined this phrase called "One Cadence, One Team." And the whole idea was to knock down those silos and say, well, at the end of the day, we all need to work together for organizational success, regardless of which function we belong to, which geography we are a part of, etc. So just to promote seamless teamwork across different functions, different geographies, etc. So I completely agree with him. I think that's become even more pronounced in the context of the pandemic, or in the context of the work from home scenario, because there's been so much rapid change that we've had to manage, so much rapid learning and unlearning and relearning that we've gone through, that had we functioned in a siloed manner, we just could not have survived, if you will. So that was very important. We talk about, for us, the biggest learning has been the rapid pace at as I mentioned earlier, the rapid pace at which we've adopted technology to which we already had access, but we never used in the past, because in an office scenario that was not required, right? In a remote working scenario, that technology became a lifeblood. So how to adopt that technology and use it effectively became a very important part of our learning. And we often talk about the challenges that remote working presented, but on the flip side, I think it created many opportunities, right? That could have been there in the past, but we didn't think of it. I'll give you one simple example. In the past, for example, whenever our senior executives had to do town halls, they had to physically be in that location to interact with employees of that location, which limited the number of employees they could touch on a worldwide basis. That's completely changed. The amount of contact that senior executives in our company have had with grassroots level employees globally, I would say has gone up 5 to 10x. We have more forums, more people participate in those forums. We have so much better in terms of a two-way dialogue between the leadership of the company and the employees today than we did in the past. So there are pluses that have come out of this experience, right? Very powerful pluses that have come out of this experience. Now, in terms of areas where I think we still need to do a lot of work is, we understand how to create a great workplace, right? Cadence has been ranked as a great place to work on the rankings all over the world for the last many years. So I think without being arrogant about it, I think let's just say that we have some level of understanding of how to create a great workplace for employees. Now the challenge is how to create that great workplace experience for the employee at home. And, staying just short of what Rajul mentioned, right? It's give them all the perks and give them the freedom. And maybe that's their definition of great workplace, but maybe that's not the right answer. But there is something that needs to be done there. The second thing is around organizational culture, right? we understand how to, I mean, I'm a strong proponent of the fact that the only long-term competitive advantage any organization has organizational culture. I think we have a reasonable handle on how to sustain an existing organizational culture with existing employees. But as we onboard new employees, how do we propagate that culture going forward? I think we still have a lot of learning to do in how that needs to happen. Of course, some of the ideas would be a more deliberate dialogue around culture, maybe more use of storytelling, and that's another skill that leaders and managers need to build. So there's a lot of learning that needs to happen that we are quite focused on at this time.
No, very, very important, Jesse. I mean, let me ask the consultant here, Rajul, how do you really, do you have any tips and tricks for us as to how do you ritualize this culture building in this new world, right? I mean, I think you have to be deliberate, as Jesse said, you have to show intentionality. And how do you really get your large middle management to, show intentionality and ritualize this culture building? Any tips?
Yeah, maybe one tip in terms of even how do you implement those flexible models of hybrid? In fact, we did a couple of assignments where, these big numbers were floated by different companies to say X% of their employees would work from anywhere after 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. So there was this huge wave of a lot of companies coming up with these statements. So in fact, we did some work with some of these companies to say, okay, let's now bring it down to say, how does this number become into a reality? And we created some kind of a framework to test, which are the roles that can, and this will happen by role within a company as well, and forget, having a common definition across. So a customized framework, and then actually, so even after we did all this maths and we came to a definition of hybrid for them, I think the questions that really started rocking the boat were, how do we ensure that our policy framework, especially policies related to people, how do we implement them or rewire them in this hybrid model? And I'll give you 2 very small examples, and they may look very rudimentary, but this is where it actually hits the road. The question was, we have created our compensation structure in such a manner that travel allowance gives a lot of benefit to people. Travel allowance is tax friendly. Now, if people are working from remote, do I give them travel allowance or not? If I do not give them, then I'm taking a part of their salary, which means there is a problem. So I give them. Now, do I roll it up with tax or not roll it up with tax? This is one simple. People who are 100% working from home, should their benefit structure be different from the people who are daily coming to office? Is there a differentiation in benefits that has to be? Would my insurer, say for example, come back with a different with a different premium requirement for people who are working from home versus people who are working in large metro cities going through the traffic on a daily basis? Now, so these are very small examples, but as you look at hybrid working, all these have to be solved in a policy framework. It cannot be answered as an ad hoc mechanism and you respond to each one of these. So there is a long list of these items that needs to be resolved from a policy perspective, and some of these decisions are not easy, may not be liked by employees if you want to do a fair treatment between people who are working from home, not working from home. Second is, when you actually want some of these people to come to office, who pays for them if they're working from their respective office locations? So, organizations will come to a decision on hybrid working model, fixed model, or variant model. But how do you get to implement it is the second challenge which a lot of organizations are facing today. Tips in terms of culture, which is your second part of your question, is a very difficult one. And, culture, and I completely agree, culture is one of the defining areas in terms of long-term sustainability and differentiation of an organization. But in this remote working situations, I think these communities that I was talking about, the culture will get driven through these communities, and organizations will have to invest like they invested with people with it, will have to invest in these communities. Define what are these actions, define these communications, and continue to pester this messaging for both in-house and the remote working. It would be a different messaging, a different method, but it would require a lot of implementation. So no quick fixes here, unfortunately. It's a lot of hard work, if I may say.
Sure, Rajul. I think I had a lot more questions, but I think in the interest of time, I had questions about technology enablements, delivery models, workspace, etc. But I guess we'll have to figure out a different mechanism to see it. Okay, I think Jesse has to take off, but I'm just going to go to.
Thanks, Sriram. I'm signing off now, if you don't mind. Absolutely.
Go ahead. So, in the interest of time, Professor, would you like to say a summary or a closing remark of
no, thank you. No, I won't take too long. So I think we are all learning it together. There are no discernible best practices across the world. All employers are still struggling to figure out what should be done in case there would be this hybrid arrangement. My sense from the trend that it is taking is that the only thing that finally it will allow us to do is that the ease with which we will allow a section of employees, and looks like that number is about 20% in most white collar, the ease with which we will allow them to work from home will only increase. And beyond that, most likely, organizations will begin with this hybrid, but mostly in countries like India. By the way, there has been a global survey, and Indians prefer to go back to office higher than many other countries. And therefore, our crowded houses, our gender inequality, our joint families, our lack of infrastructure, and offices being a nice place to relax, a combination of that, and youthful population that finds office a better escape than home, will lead to a situation where most people will go back to office. Employers will find it easier because their old methods can continue. And what hybrid will finally end up meaning is that a higher proportion of people will be quote unquote easily, without grudge, allowed to work from home. So therefore, what will happen is about 80% of people will still work from office. About 20% of people, which was just 2-3% earlier in many companies, or little more depending on the company, will increase. And that the people who will work remotely, initially there'll be a lot of negotiation around how to see that they are included, rewarded, and not punished. But over a period of time, it is anyone's guess that majority generally defines the rules. So the people who will come to office may form a club, which will decide that these people should be stripped of their benefits, and they may trade off their newfound flexibility, staying in Hubli or Hisar, for a lack of travel allowance or something like that. I think this is where it is headed, is my sense. But should it be headed there? The answer is no. And where it should be headed is the topic of a next panel discussion.
I was going to say that I hate to do this. I think discussions are really getting very interesting now, but there is a reality of time. So I have to do the bad job of bringing it to a close. But I think we've had some very good discussions today. I think maybe we've touched upon only a few questions. We've not even gone to the enablement tools, the technologies, what kind of things you should be prepared with, etc. Maybe I'll find a mechanism to have the discussion with each of you separately. I think what will be useful, and my request to the panelists is, how do we keep this going so that we can reach to a meaningful milestone in terms of creating something which is tangible and usable. So I
will tell you one thing in which it will be extremely important, at least from my perspective, is that unless we do ground level research,
sure,
and unless we create data insights based on actual experiences of people, no meaningful conclusions can be drawn. For that to happen, industry has to come forward and allow for research to happen in their own interest when they can't find an answer to the question, so how many days should I call my people to work? Is it 3 days or 2 days? Or is it Monday, Tuesday, or is Wednesday, Thursday, so that they have bigger weekends on both sides? This question should not be based on the opinion of an authoritarian leader, but based on the evidence of productivity that follows, for which in an ideal situation, there should be a collaboration between those who are interested in research and those who are interested in improving practice to come together and gain the evidence so that informed decision making happens on this
Absolutely,
very important area.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think as we go through this journey, I think we have to collect opinions, thoughts, build a hypothesis. And I'm also going to request the panel that if, obviously we need research backing. That's where I think I will need support of people like you. And then, can you also help us in your own organizations validate some of this hypothesis, right?
Right.
That's where I think we will get to. But anyway, I'm really sorry I have to really bring this to a close, and I also apologize to the audience today because I've not been able to take any of their questions. I see a lot of them on the Q&A, and so we'll figure out a way to basically get that answered by you, because there are some questions specifically to panelists, right? I sincerely thank all of you who made it today, and it was an absolute pleasure moderating this discussion. Very, very insightful. And last but not the least, I really thank BlueCircle for allowing their platform to have this discussion. So I think it made it a lot easier for me, right? And all of us, right? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good evening, good night, good day, wherever you are. So I'll keep in touch with you and, take stock of things and get back to you in a day.
Thank you. Most welcome. A very pleasure to meet the fellow panelists. We will all be in touch. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks, Sriram.
Take care.